My name's Samantha Mitchell, but everyone calls me Sam. At 32, I was West Ridge Consulting's top business development specialist, known for landing impossible clients. After living in Tokyo for 5 years, I speak fluent Japanese, which is why I was leading our $50 million pitch to Tanaka Corporation. I'd spent months preparing for this meeting. But something felt off about my boss, Richard, lately. His fake smile this morning confirmed my suspicions when he unexpectedly walked into the conference room right before our presentation began. Before I dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoy corporate revenge stories where the underdog finally gets her moment. I never planned to become the center of a corporate drama. My career path had been methodical and deliberate since earning my graduate degree in international business from Cornell. After graduation, I spent 5 years working for a multinational in Tokyo. There, I didn't just develop my language skills, but also a deep appreciation for Japanese business culture. When I returned to the States, West Ridge Consulting snapped me up because of my unique skill set. In my 3 years at West Ridge, I'd brought in 7 major clients, each contract worth at least $10 million. I had a reputation for thoroughness, cultural sensitivity, and an uncanny ability to anticipate client needs. The Tanaka Corporation opportunity, however, was on another level entirely. A $50 million contract would be the largest in our firm's history. I first connected with Tanaka Corporation at an international trade conference in Chicago. Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka, the CEO, seemed surprised when I approached him and introduced myself in Japanese. We had a brief but pleasant conversation about his keynote speech, and I mentioned some observations about his company's recent expansion into American markets. He gave me his card and suggested we continue the conversation. That single interaction launched 6 months of careful relationship building. I researched everything about Tanaka Corporation, stayed up late for calls with their Tokyo office, created detailed proposals addressing their specific challenges, and cultivated relationships with key decision-makers. I essentially became the internal expert on all things Tanaka at West Ridge. My colleagues generally respected my work. James Cooper, another senior consultant, often collaborated with me and appreciated my attention to detail. We'd developed a good professional friendship, sharing lunches and occasionally venting about office politics. James was one of the few men at West Ridge who never tried to take credit for my work. Because despite our modern glass offices and diversity statements, West Ridge operated like an old boys club beneath the surface. The executive team was predominantly male, and the handful of women at that level had adopted the same aggressive, credit-stealing approach to survive. The culture rewarded cutthroat behavior and flashy presentations over substance and relationship building. Richard Blackwell, my direct supervisor and executive vice president of client acquisition, embodied everything problematic about West Ridge. At 45, he had the polished appearance of success with his tailored suits and perfectly maintained, silver-streaked hair. He spoke confidently in meetings, commanded attention, and charmed clients initially. But those of us working under him knew the truth. Richard contributed very little original work. His primary talent was identifying which projects would succeed, inserting himself at critical moments, and ensuring he received credit. For my first 2 years, Richard and I maintained a functioning professional relationship. I delivered results. He took partial credit but also promoted my work enough that I advanced. It was an unspoken arrangement I tolerated because I was building my reputation and client base. Things changed 3 months ago when rumors of a merger started circulating. Suddenly, executives became protective of their positions, scrambling to prove their indispensability. The pressure to land major clients intensified, and the Tanaka deal became the crown jewel everyone wanted associated with their name. I noticed Richard's behavior shift. He began attending meetings he would normally skip, asked for daily updates on my progress with Tanaka, and introduced strange last-minute changes to my carefully crafted proposals. Most concerning, he started bringing Marcus Chun to these meetings. Marcus was Richard's new star hire from a competitor firm. Fresh-faced. At 29 with an MBA from Wharton, Marcus had the right pedigree on paper but lacked any real experience with Japanese clients. Nevertheless, Richard began positioning Marcus as a key member of the Tanaka acquisition team, despite him joining just weeks before the crucial meeting. Victoria Hayes, our HR director, was another interesting player in the Westridge ecosystem. A sharp woman in her late 40s, Victoria had survived multiple leadership changes through careful political maneuvering. She disliked Richard, that much was clear from subtle eye rolls during his presentations, but she never openly opposed him. I'd had a few candid conversations with her when working on company culture initiatives, and she once cryptically mentioned that Richard was on thin ice with certain board members. As the meeting with Tanaka approached, I threw myself into preparations. I created custom presentations addressing their specific expansion challenges, prepared detailed implementation timelines, and even researched Mr. Tanaka's hometown to include subtle references that would resonate personally. I rehearsed potential questions and answers until I could respond to anything in both English and Japanese. The night before the big meeting, I stayed at the office until midnight, reviewing everything one last time. As I gathered my things to leave, I found Richard in the conference room we'd be using, reviewing my presentation slides. "Just making sure everything's perfect for tomorrow," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've added Marcus to the presenter list. He'll handle the financial projections section." I felt a knot form in my stomach. The financial projections were complex and integrated cultural considerations that Marcus wouldn't understand. "Richard, those projections are built on cultural assumptions about how Tanaka approaches long-term partnerships. Marcus hasn't been part of those discussions?" Richard's smile tightened. "He's brilliant with numbers, Sam. Sometimes fresh eyes are exactly what we need. Besides, I want to show Tanaka our depth of talent." I recognized the tone. The decision was made, and disagreement would only make me look uncooperative. I nodded professionally and left, texting James on my way home. Richard added Marcus to present financials tomorrow. Red flag. James responded immediately. Politics at play. Watch your back. I barely slept that night, rehearsing how to salvage the situation if Marcus misrepresented our capabilities. I had no idea that the actual meeting would unfold in a way I could never have prepared for. The morning of the Tanaka meeting, I woke at 5 a.m. after fitful sleep. I selected my outfit carefully. A navy blue suit that conveyed professionalism without being too aggressively American, with a silk scarf featuring a subtle pattern that incorporated elements of both Western and Japanese design. Small details mattered when building cross-cultural business relationships. I arrived at the office by 6:30 a.m. to prepare the conference room. I personally arranged everything from the seating chart that respected Japanese hierarchical considerations to the refreshments that included both Western options and Japanese green tea I'd specially ordered. I placed leather portfolios containing our proposals at each seat with business cards positioned according to Japanese etiquette. At 8:45, 15 minutes before the Tanaka team was scheduled to arrive, my phone buzzed with a text from the reception desk. The clients had arrived early, as I'd anticipated they might. Japanese business culture valued punctuality to the point that arriving exactly on time was cutting it close. I hurried down to greet them personally. Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka led a team of 5 executives. At 62, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had built his company from a small technology firm to an international corporation. Behind his traditional politeness lay shrewd business acumen. I bowed appropriately and greeted him in Japanese, then switched to English to welcome the entire group. "Mitchell-san, thank you for your warm welcome," Mr. Tanaka replied. "We are looking forward to our discussions today." I escorted them to the conference room, making introductions to James and the other team members who had arrived early as I had requested. Notably absent was Richard, who should have been there to greet clients of this caliber. Just as I began offering refreshments, Richard burst into the room 7 minutes late with Marcus trailing behind him. "Mr. Tanaka, so wonderful to finally meet you in person," Richard announced at a volume slightly too loud for the setting. He thrust his hand forward for an aggressive handshake, missing the subtle cues that Mr. Tanaka would have preferred to bow. I saw a flicker of discomfort cross Mr. Tanaka's face before his professional mask returned. I see Samantha has been keeping you entertained, Richard continued, using my full name despite knowing I preferred Sam professionally. Let me introduce Marcus Junn, our financial strategy expert, who's been instrumental in developing the proposal you'll see today. I maintained my professional smile while mentally noting that Marcus had contributed exactly nothing to the proposal. Mr. Tanaka's chief financial officer, Kenji Watanabe, looked at Marcus with interest, asking a specific question about currency fluctuation projections that I had included in the report. Before Marcus could fumble for an answer, Richard jumped in. We'll be covering all those details in our presentation. Shall we begin? I started the presentation as planned, providing an overview of our understanding of Tanaka Corporation's objectives and challenges. I had just begun explaining our proposed approach when Richard interrupted. Sam, let's jump ahead to slide 20. I think Mr. Tanaka would find the market penetration strategy more engaging to start with. It was a clear power move that disrupted the narrative flow I had carefully constructed. The market penetration strategy made little sense without the foundational understanding I was establishing. Nevertheless, I smoothly transitioned to the requested section, adapting my explanation to provide necessary context. As the first hour progressed, Richard continued his subtle undermining. He would interject with clarifications that often contradicted points I had researched extensively. He repeatedly highlighted Marcus' minimal contributions while glossing over the comprehensive work I had done. When we took our first 15-minute break, Richard pulled me aside in the hallway, his smile gone. You're coming on too strong, Sam. You need to create space for Marcus to establish credibility with the financial team. Richard, with respect. Marcus isn't familiar with the cultural nuances underlying our financial projections. Mr. Watanabe is asking technical questions that require context. That's exactly the problem. You're positioning yourself as the only person who can handle this account. That's not team playing. His voice had a warning edge. You're on thin ice. Here, remember that this is a Westridge account, not a Samantha Mitchell account. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my growing frustration. I'm just trying to ensure we present accurate information. Then help Marcus look good, Richard said flatly. That's your job right now. I returned to the conference room where James gave me a questioning look. I subtly shook my head as Mr. Tanaka and his team returned from their break. I noticed they were speaking quietly among themselves in Japanese with occasional glances toward our team. I caught fragments suggesting they were confused about who was actually leading the project. Richard clapped his hands together as everyone settled. For this next section, Marcus will walk us through the financial implementation and ROI projections. Marcus stood, straightening his tie nervously. He began clicking through my carefully prepared slides, but it immediately became apparent he didn't understand the underlying strategy. He mischaracterized our implementation timeline, suggesting we could complete in 3 months what I had honestly projected would take 6. When he reached the ROI projections, the disconnect became more serious. He described the figures as conservative estimates when I had actually presented best-case scenarios to avoid overpromising. Worse, he completely missed explaining how we had accounted for Japanese fiscal year considerations. I watched Mr. Watanabe's eyebrows draw together as he took careful notes. The other Tanaka executives exchanged glances. Their body language was shifting from engaged interest to polite skepticism. I tried to catch Marcus' eye to subtly redirect him, but he avoided my gaze, plowing ahead with growing confidence as he butchered months of my careful work. Richard was nodding approvingly, either oblivious to or unconcerned with the inaccuracies. When Marcus concluded, Mr. Watanabe politely asked about a discrepancy between the written proposal and Marcus' verbal claims about implementation speed. I waited for Marcus to correct himself, but he doubled down. The written proposal is outdated. We've developed a more aggressive approach since then. This was news to me and completely untrue. I felt my professional reputation crumbling in real time. I carefully began, if I may clarify. Richard immediately cut me off. I think what Marcus means is that we have contingency plans to accelerate implementation if certain benchmarks are met early. This improvised explanation made no logical sense with our actual strategy. I saw Mr. Tanaka making a note, his expression unreadable. As the second half of the presentation continued, I became increasingly sidelined in my own meeting. Richard announced that Marcus would lead the second half, relegating me to simply advancing slides. The room's energy had shifted palpably. With the Tanaka team becoming more reserved, asking fewer questions, their body language closing off. I maintained my composure, but inside I felt a growing sense of dread. 6 months of meticulous work was being dismantled in real time, and with it potentially my professional reputation with a major international client. The meeting continued with Marcus fumbling through slides I had created, occasionally looking to me for help, but then cutting me off when I attempted to clarify points. Each time he spoke, he drove the presentation further from the carefully crafted strategy I had developed based on my understanding of Tanaka Corporation's needs. While Marcus spoke, my mind flashed back to previous instances of Richard undermining. There was the Goldstein account last year, where my market analysis was presented as team findings while Richard took sole credit for the strategy that was directly based on my analysis. Then the Peterson proposal, where Richard had removed my name from the document entirely before submitting it to the client. Each time, I had swallowed my pride and continued producing excellent work, believing my results would eventually speak for themselves. Mr. Tanaka shifted uncomfortably as Marcus confidently stated that Westridge had extensive experience implementing similar systems for Japanese companies, something that was blatantly untrue. We had worked with exactly one Japanese company before, on a much smaller scale, and I was the only team member involved in that project. I noticed other cultural missteps accumulating. Marcus referred to Mr. Tanaka by his first name. Something I had specifically noted in our preparation materials was inappropriate. He interrupted Mr. Watanabe twice while the CFO was asking questions. He made an American sports analogy that had no relevance in Japanese culture. The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Mr. Tanaka's assistant, Yuki Nakamura, was frowning at her notes. Takashi Shimizu, their chief technology officer, had stopped asking questions entirely and was sitting back with arms crossed. When Marcus incorrectly described our proposed technology integration timeline, suggesting we could bypass critical testing phases that I knew Tanaka Corporation would never agree to skip, I felt I had to intervene for the sake of honesty. If I could add some context to that point, I began carefully. Our written proposal actually outlines a more comprehensive testing phase that aligns with Tanaka Corporation's established quality assurance protocols. Richard shot me a warning glance, but Mr. Tanaka leaned forward with interest. Yes, Mitchell-san, could you elaborate? The testing phase is of particular concern to our technical team. Before I could respond, Richard smoothly interjected, I think we should stay on track with the presentation. We can address specific implementation questions in the Q and A portion. Mr. Tanaka nodded politely, but I could see disappointment in his expression. Marcus continued, now looking increasingly uncomfortable as he sensed the room's changing energy but didn't understand the cause. When Marcus reached the slide about our communication protocols during implementation, he completely misrepresented our capabilities, claiming we had dedicated Japanese-speaking staff available 24/7, a service we had never discussed and could not possibly provide. I was the only fluent Japanese speaker on our team, and Marcus had just promised round-the-clock access. Mr. Shimizu asked directly, who would be these Japanese-speaking staff members? Marcus looked panicked for a moment before replying, we have resources available through our international partners. This was a complete fabrication. I felt physically ill watching our credibility dissolve. As Marcus stumbled through the next few slides, Mr. Tanaka asked a specific technical question about compliance with Japanese data protection regulations, something I had thoroughly researched and addressed in the written materials. I began to respond. The proposal includes a detailed compliance framework that ... Richard interrupted again. Marcus, would you like to address that question? Marcus looked like a deer in headlights before recovering with, we ensure compliance with all relevant regulations through our standard implementation process. The vague non-answer hung in the air, Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Shimizu exchanged glances. I could see the deal slipping away. The Tanaka team was losing confidence with each passing minute. Mr. Watanabe checked his watch and whispered something to Mr. Tanaka, who nodded slightly. Richard must have sensed it too because he suddenly stood up. Perhaps this is a good time for another short break. Sam, could I speak with you outside? In the hallway, Richard's professional veneer dropped completely. His face was flushed with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing?
He hissed. Richard, they're asking specific technical questions that Marcus can't answer.
We're losing credibility by the minute. The information he's providing contradicts the written proposal they've already reviewed. The problem isn't Marcus, Richard snapped. It's your attitude. You can't stand not being the center of attention, can you? You've made it impossible for anyone else to succeed with this client. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice measured. This isn't about attention. It's about accuracy. We're making promises we can't keep and misrepresenting our capabilities.
That's
going to damage Westridge's reputation, not just this deal. What damages Westridge is having team members who don't support each other, Richard retorted. I brought you into this meeting as a courtesy given your preliminary work, but your role is to support the team presentation, not contradict it. My preliminary work? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. I've been leading this account for 6 months. I built this entire presentation and strategy. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let me make something very clear. Your future at Westridge depends on how the next hour goes. If you can't be a team player and support Marcus, there will be consequences. Do you understand? The threat was unmistakable. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. Good, Richard said, his fake smile returning. Now, let's get back in there and close this deal. As we returned to the conference room, I noticed James watching the interaction with concern. The Tanaka team was quietly conversing in Japanese, and I caught fragments suggesting they were discussing whether to continue the meeting at all. My stomach churned with conflict. Everything I had worked for at Westridge was on the line, but so was my professional integrity. As Marcus resumed his mangling of my presentation, I faced the most difficult decision of my career. When we returned to the conference room, the atmosphere had chilled noticeably. The Tanaka team sat with perfect posture, their expressions politely neutral, a sign in Japanese business culture that serious reservations had developed. Marcus resumed the presentation, now visibly nervous and speaking too quickly as he clicked to a slide showing projected revenue growth. He made his most egregious error yet. As you can see, we're projecting a 40% increase in market penetration within the first quarter, with ROI realized within 6 months. These numbers were pure fantasy. My careful projections had estimated 15% growth in the first quarter, with ROI more realistically expected around 18 months if everything went perfectly. The claims Marcus was making weren't just optimistic. They were impossible. I saw Mr. Watanabe frown and make a note. Mr. Tanaka folded his hands and leaned back slightly, body language I recognized as a significant withdrawal of interest. Richard must have sensed the shift as well. He smoothly interjected, "What Marcus means is that under ideal conditions, we could see movement toward these ambitious targets. Of course, practical implementation often reveals opportunities for refinement." It was corporate doublespeak at its finest, saying nothing while trying to retreat from Marcus's claims without admitting they were wrong. Mr. Tanaka spoke for the first time in nearly 30 minutes. Blackwell-san, these projections differ substantially from the written materials we reviewed. Could you clarify which represents Westridge's actual position? The question was polite but direct, aimed precisely at the credibility gap that had been widening throughout the presentation. Richard was cornered. The written materials represent our baseline projections, Richard improvised. What Marcus has presented are our reach targets under optimal conditions. Mr. Tanaka nodded slowly, then addressed a question to me directly for the first time since the presentation began. Mitchell-san is the person who prepared our initial briefings. What is your assessment of these optimal conditions? How frequently do you achieve them in similar implementations? All eyes turned to me. Richard's gaze was particularly intense, his earlier threat hanging in the air between us. This was the moment of truth. I could either back Richard's fiction or tell the truth and likely end my career at Westridge. I took a breath and chose my words carefully. Mr. Tanaka, the written materials reflect our careful analysis based on historical performance and specific conditions in your market. While we always strive for optimal outcomes, I believe the written projections represent a more reliable planning basis. The room fell silent. I had contradicted both Marcus and Richard, though in the most diplomatic way possible. Richard's face flushed red. Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Watanabe exchanged glances, followed by a brief comment in Japanese that I understood as, "At least someone is being honest." Richard stood suddenly. "I think we need to align our messaging. Sam, may I speak with you outside again?" Without waiting for a response, he headed for the door. Professional courtesy required that I follow, though every instinct told me to stay. "Please excuse me for a moment," I said to the Tanaka team with a slight bow. In the hallway, Richard didn't bother keeping his voice down. "What the hell was that? Did you not understand me earlier?" "Richard, they directly asked for my professional assessment. What was I supposed to do? Lie? You were supposed to support the team position. Do you have any idea what's at stake here? This isn't just about the Tanaka deal. The merger announcement is coming next week, and this account could determine which executives stay after restructuring." Suddenly, his behavior made perfect sense. This wasn't just about credit. For a big client, Richard was positioning himself for the post-merger organization. "So, this is about saving your position," I said quietly. "This is about Westridge presenting a united front to a major potential client," he snapped. "But clearly you're not capable of being a team player when it doesn't put you in the spotlight." I maintained my composure. The Tanaka team deserves accurate information to make their decision. They've flown halfway around the world for this meeting. Your job isn't to decide what the client needs to hear. Your job is to follow direction from your supervisor. His voice rose with each word. "But apparently that's too much to ask. Richard, we're losing them if we go back in with more exaggerated claims." "We're not going back in," he cut me off. "You're not going back in. You're done."
Here, Sam, I stared at him, not fully comprehending.
"You're terminated, effective immediately. Your insubordination and undermining of colleagues cannot be tolerated. I'll have HR contact you about collecting your personal items." The words hit like physical blows. 3 years at Westridge, countless successful projects, nights and weekends sacrificed, all ended in a hallway because I wouldn't support a lie. "You're firing me in the middle of the Tanaka presentation?" I asked incredulously. "I'm firing you for insubordination and failure to support team objectives." Richard's voice was cold. "I'll explain to the clients that we've had a personnel issue that necessitated your departure." He turned to walk back into the conference room. In that moment, something crystallized within me. A strange calm replaced the shock and anger. I had spent 6 months building a relationship with Tanaka Corporation. I knew their business, their goals, and their culture better than anyone at Westridge, and I had done nothing wrong. I followed Richard back into the room. "I apologize for the interruption," Richard announced smoothly to the Tanaka team. "Unfortunately, Sam will be leaving us due to an internal matter. Marcus and I will continue the presentation." The Tanaka executives looked confused by this sudden development. Mr. Tanaka's eyes met mine questioningly. Instead of gathering my things and slinking away in humiliation, as Richard clearly expected, I straightened my shoulders and looked directly at Mr. Tanaka. Then I switched to Japanese. "Tanaka-san, I wish to apologize for the confusion today," I said in fluent Japanese, watching Richard's expression change from smug satisfaction to dawning horror. "I have just been informed that my employment with Westridge is terminated effective immediately." Mr. Tanaka's eyebrows raised slightly, the Japanese equivalent of extreme surprise. I continued in Japanese. "I have greatly valued our professional relationship these past 6 months. I believe in the partnership we have been building, but I can no longer represent Westridge Consulting." Richard's face had turned ashen as he realized what was happening. He had no idea what I was saying, but he could see the Tanaka team's full attention was on me. Mitchell-san, this is most unusual, Mr. Tanaka replied in Japanese. We came here specifically because of your understanding of our needs. I nodded acknowledgement. The situation is unfortunate. However, as I am now an independent consultant, I would be honored to continue supporting Tanaka Corporation's American expansion directly, without intermediaries. My consulting fee would be 10% of project value, substantially less than Westridge's 25% fee structure, while providing the consistency and expertise you originally sought. Mr. Watanabe's eyes widened at the mention of fees. CFOs always notice cost savings. Mr. Shimizu leaned forward with interest. You would be able to deliver the same quality of service independently? Mr. Tanaka asked carefully. I would personally guarantee the deliverables outlined in the original proposal I prepared, with the accurate timelines and projections we discussed previously. Without the need to support Westridge's overhead, I can offer more competitive pricing and direct access. Richard finally found his voice. What's going on? What are you saying to them? I turned to him with perfect professional courtesy. I'm informing Mr. Tanaka that I've been terminated and can no longer represent Westridge. I've also offered my services as an independent consultant to continue supporting their American market entry. Richard's face contorted with rage. You can't do that. This is Westridge's client. Mr. Tanaka switched to English. Actually, Blackwell-san, we have not yet signed any agreement with Westridge. We have merely been exploring possibilities. His tone was polite but firm. Mitchell-san's departure creates a significant concern for us, as she has been our primary contact and demonstrates the understanding of our needs that we require. Richard scrambled to recover. I assure you, Mr. Tanaka, our entire team is fully capable of executing this project. Marcus will serve as your new primary contact, with my direct oversight. Mr. Tanaka looked at Marcus, who was staring at his notes, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should take some time to reconsider our options, Mr. Tanaka said diplomatically. This development is unexpected. As I gathered my portfolio, my hands perfectly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had just burned a bridge in spectacular fashion, but for the first time in years I felt truly in control of my professional destiny. Mitchell-san, Mr. Tanaka said as I prepared to leave, would you be available to continue our discussion at our hotel this afternoon? I believe we have more to talk about. Before I could answer, the conference room door opened and Victoria Hayes from HR appeared, summoned by Richard via text. Sam, she said formally. I understand there's a situation. Richard jumped in. Victoria, Sam is being terminated for insubordination and has attempted to poach a Westridge client during this meeting. Please escort her from the building immediately. Victoria looked between Richard's flushed face, my calm expression, and the interested Tanaka executives. With the political instinct that had kept her employed through multiple regime changes, she assessed the situation in seconds. Perhaps we could handle this with appropriate discretion, she suggested smoothly. Mr. Tanaka, please accept our apologies for this disruption. Mr. Tanaka stood, followed immediately by his team. No apologies necessary. We have concluded our business here for today. In any case, he handed me his business card with both hands. Mitchell-san, we will expect you at the Peninsula Hotel at 3 o'clock. As the Tanaka team gathered their materials, Richard made one last desperate attempt. Mr. Tanaka, anything Sam has presented to you is Westridge intellectual property. She has no authority. The core analysis and strategy development was completed on my own time, I interjected calmly. I have dated drafts and emails proving development outside office hours. The presentation contains Westridge templates, which I will not use going forward. Victoria winced slightly, recognizing the legal distinction I had just established. In my preparation frenzy, I had indeed worked countless evenings and weekends from home, creating a clear record of independent work. Mr. Tanaka and his team left with formal politeness. That did nothing to disguise their eagerness to continue discussions with me separately. As the door closed behind them, Richard turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. You'll never work in consulting again. I'll make sure of it. I met his gaze steadily. I believe I just did exactly that. Victoria, I'll clean out my desk and return my access card. Richard, I suggest you prepare your explanation for the board about why Tanaka Corporation is no longer considering Westridge. As I walked out of the conference room, James caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod of respect. I had just thrown away years of corporate advancement in exchange for the biggest gamble of my professional life. And somehow it felt exactly right. I maintained perfect composure as I packed my personal items under Victoria's watchful eye. Years of navigating corporate politics had taught me the value of dignity, especially in moments of crisis. I placed family photos, my degree, and a few professional awards into a cardboard box, acutely aware of colleagues watching curiously from behind cubicle walls. Is there anything else you need from your computer? Victoria asked, her tone professionally neutral, but her eyes communicating something more complex. No, thank you. I've kept most of my personal documents in cloud storage. This was true, but also a reminder that I had access to all my independently created work related to Tanaka. Victoria nodded slightly. Sam, off the record, that was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've seen in 20 years of HR. I paused in my packing. Which do you think it was? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Ask me in a month. She glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. Richard has been making enemies on the executive floor. The timing of this incident is interesting. Before I could ask what she meant, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Mr. Watanabe's assistant. Car waiting for you. At West Entrance, Mr. Tanaka requests early meeting. Victoria pretended not to notice as I read the message. I'll need your access card and laptop, she said officially, then added more quietly, good luck, Sam. I handed over the company property, picked up my surprisingly light box of belongings, and walked through the office for the last time. Colleagues watched with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. James stood as I passed his office, giving me a subtle thumbs up. Outside, a black luxury sedan waited at the curb. The driver took my box and opened the door to reveal Mr. Tanaka sitting alone in the back seat. Mitchell-san, please join me, he said formally. As the car pulled away from Westridge Consulting, possibly forever, I felt an unexpected lightness. Mr. Tanaka observed me thoughtfully. You appear remarkably calm for someone who just experienced such a dramatic professional change, he noted. The situation was becoming untenable, I replied. Honestly, what you witnessed today has been developing for some time. Mr. Tanaka nodded. When we first met at the Chicago conference, I researched you thoroughly. Your reputation for integrity and precision is consistent. This is why your endorsement of projections you clearly did not believe in seemed so incongruous. I appreciated his directness. I should never have allowed myself to be placed in that position. I apologize for the unprofessional scene. On the contrary, Mr. Tanaka said, surprising me. It was most illuminating to see how you handled a difficult situation. In Japan, we have a saying, true character is revealed in times of crisis. Your actions today told me more about your character than 6 months of presentations. The car arrived at the Peninsula Hotel, where we were escorted to a private meeting room. The entire Tanaka executive team was already assembled along with 2 people I didn't recognize. Mitchell-san, these are our legal advisors, Mr. Tanaka explained. Given the unusual circumstances, we thought it prudent to have them present for our discussion. For the next 2 hours, we engaged in a detailed exploration of what an independent consulting arrangement might look like. I outlined my capabilities, the support I could realistically provide without Westridge's resources, and my proposed fee structure. The Tanaka team asked penetrating questions that tested both my technical knowledge and my honesty about limitations. You understand that Westridge may claim ownership of the work you've done for us so far, Mr. Shimizu pointed out. I've been careful to distinguish between work done using company resources and my independent analysis, I explained. I can provide similar quality of insight going forward without using any Westridge proprietary information. While we were still discussing terms, my phone began buzzing repeatedly. James was texting urgent updates. Richard in emergency meeting with CEO. Word spreading about what happened. Victoria defending your work to executives. Richard claiming you violated non-compete. I silenced my phone and refocused on the discussion at hand. If Westridge was going to pursue legal action, worrying about it now wouldn't help. Better to secure this client and deal with challenges as they arose. Just as we were wrapping up our discussion, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I excused myself to answer it. Samantha Mitchell, this is Lawrence Barrett, General Counsel for Westridge Consulting. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, Mr. Barrett. I understand there was an incident today regarding the Tanaka Corporation presentation. That's correct. My employment was terminated during the meeting. Miss Mitchell, I need to remind you about the non-solicitation and non-compete clauses in your employment agreement. Any attempt to appropriate Westridge clients would constitute a breach of contract. I had anticipated this. Mr. Barrett, I did not solicit Tanaka Corporation. I was terminated in front of the client who then independently approached me about continuing our professional relationship. Additionally, the work product I personally created outside of business hours is not covered by my employment agreement as per Section 4.3 regarding independent intellectual property. A pause on the line. We should discuss this further. Are you represented by counsel? Not currently, but I'm familiar with the terms of my agreement. I'd be happy to review any concerns Westridge has once I've had time to consult with an attorney. After hanging up, I returned to the Tanaka team and transparently explained the situation. Westridge may challenge our right to work together. I want you to be fully aware of this potential complication. Rather than being deterred, Mr. Watanabe looked intrigued. What specifically does your non-compete prohibit? It prevents me from soliciting Westridge clients for 1 year after termination. However, there are 2 relevant exceptions: clients who approached me independently after termination and projects where I was not the original contact point at Westridge. And who made the initial contact with Tanaka Corporation? Mr. Tanaka asked. Richard Blackwell sent the first email, which I was copied on. I then handled all subsequent communication. Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Watanabe exchanged looks. Our legal team will review this, but I believe we can proceed. We initiated contact with you after your termination, and we were already having doubts about Westridge before today's events. By early evening, we had reached a preliminary agreement. I would provide consulting services to Tanaka Corporation, directly at a fee significantly less than Westridge's, but still generous for an independent consultant. The contract would be contingent on resolving any valid legal challenges from Westridge. As we were finalizing details, my phone buzzed with an email from Victoria. Sam, for your information, board member Elizabeth Chun has requested full documentation of today's events and your overall work with Tanaka. Richard being questioned extensively. Take care, V. This was unexpected. Elizabeth Chun was a relatively new board member with a reputation for scrutinizing executive conduct. Her interest suggested the situation at Westridge was more complex than a simple termination. When I returned to my hotel room that night, I found 3 voicemails from Westridge executives, including the CEO, asking me to call them to discuss the situation. I also had messages from 5 colleagues expressing support and hinting they might be interested in joining any venture I started. The most surprising communication was an email from a partner at River Capital Group, a major investor in emerging consultancies. Miss Mitchell, I heard about your departure from Westridge under unusual circumstances. A mutual acquaintance speaks highly of your capabilities. If you're establishing an independent practice, I'd be interested in discussing potential backing. Jonathan Rivera. Sitting on the edge of my hotel bed, laptop open to a half-drafted business plan, I felt dizzy with the speed of developments. 24 hours ago, I had been a senior consultant at Westridge, following the expected corporate path. Now, I was potentially on the verge of launching my own firm with a major client already lined up. I worked through the night, creating a formal proposal for Tanaka Corporation, drafting responses to potential legal challenges from Westridge, and outlining a business structure that could scale beyond a single client. By dawn, I had the framework. of a viable consulting practice and a clearer sense of both the risks and opportunities ahead. As I finally fell into exhausted sleep around 6 a.m., my last thought was that getting fired might turn out to be the best career development of my life. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. I secured a virtual office address, registered Mitchell International Consulting LLC, and set up basic business infrastructure with the help of an attorney specializing in employment transitions. My savings, originally earmarked for an eventual down payment on a condo, became startup capital. 3 days after my dramatic exit from Westridge, I met with the Tanaka team to sign our consulting agreement. The contract was worth $5 million annually, less than the $50 million Westridge had been pursuing, but appropriate for the scaled-down services I could realistically provide as an independent consultant. More importantly, it represented a 10% fee rather than Westridge's 25%, saving Tanaka Corporation substantial money while actually increasing my personal compensation. Mitchell-san, we are pleased to formalize our partnership, Mr. Tanaka said as we exchanged signed copies. Our legal team believes your non-compete with Westridge is not enforceable in this situation, but we are prepared to defend our right to work with you if necessary. I had barely returned to my hotel when my phone rang with Westridge's main number. Sam, it's David Harrington. The CEO's voice was carefully neutral. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course, I replied, equally neutral. I've been reviewing the Tanaka situation. There are aspects of how your termination was handled that don't align with company policy. I'd like to meet to discuss potential resolutions. Translation: Richard had created a mess, and they were assessing damage control options. I appreciate the call, David, but I've already established my independent practice and signed Tanaka Corporation as a client? A long pause. I see. Well, that's unfortunate timing. We were prepared to offer you reinstatement with a promotion to Executive Director of International Accounts. The offer was tempting, but also transparently motivated by desperation. That's generous, but I'm committed to my new path. I wish Westridge continued success. Sam, before you make this permanent, you should know that Richard Blackwell has been placed on administrative leave pending review of several incidents, including your termination. That was unexpected. I appreciate your transparency, David, but my decision stands. After declining Westridge's olive branch, I threw myself into building my consulting practice. I worked 18-hour days, setting up systems, creating deliverables for Tanaka, and responding to a surprising flood of interest from other potential clients who had somehow heard about my departure from Westridge. James called a week after my termination. The office is still buzzing about your exit. Richard hasn't returned. Rumor has it the board is conducting a full review of his client interactions after Elizabeth Chun raised concerns. How are things there otherwise? I asked, genuinely curious about the fallout. Chaotic? 3 people have been assigned to manage different pieces of what you handled. The Goldstein account is asking specifically for you, and Parker Industries is threatening to review their contract since you were their main contact. He paused. Also, I've been thinking about my own next steps if you're building a team. By the end of my second week of independence, I had received similar calls from 4 other Westridge colleagues. By the 3rd week, I had leased a small office space and hired James as my first employee, along with a recent MBA graduate as an analyst. The most satisfying moment came when Victoria Hayes called. Sam, I've resigned from Westridge effective next month. The Richard situation revealed some cultural issues I can no longer ignore. Elizabeth Chun has been appointed interim EVP of Client Services, and she's making significant changes, but I'm ready for something new. Are you looking for a position? I asked, surprised. Actually, I'm starting an HR consulting practice, focused on ethical workplace cultures. I thought you might be interested in being my first client, given your rapid growth. Within 3 months, Mitchell International Consulting had grown to 7 employees, all working primarily on the Tanaka implementation, but beginning to develop additional client relationships. We had moved to larger offices in a downtown building that, ironically, had a direct view of the Westridge headquarters across the street. The Tanaka project was proceeding exactly as I had originally projected, not hitting Marcus' fantasy targets but delivering solid, sustainable results that satisfied the client. Mr. Tanaka had introduced me to 2 other Japanese companies considering American expansion, and we were in late-stage discussions with both. Richard Blackwell's threatened legal action against me never materialized. According to James's sources at Westridge, the review of his client interactions had uncovered patterns of misrepresentation and credit stealing that made any litigation inadvisable. He had ultimately been terminated himself, a fact I learned from a brief Wall Street Journal mention of executive changes at Westridge. The merger that had driven so much of the dysfunction had indeed gone through, but with different outcomes than Richard had anticipated. Elizabeth Chen's appointment signaled a shift toward more ethical business practices, and several of the old guard executives had departed during the transition. One Monday morning, almost exactly a year after my termination, my assistant interrupted a strategy session. "Sam, there's a Richard Blackwell here without an appointment. He's insisting on seeing you." The room fell silent. James raised his eyebrows questioningly. "Give me a minute, then send him in," I decided. Richard looked different. His designer suit replaced by something off the rack, his confident posture diminished. He took in our sleek offices with poorly disguised envy. "Samantha, you've done well for yourself." "Thank you, Richard. What brings you here today?" He placed a business card on my desk. "I've joined Meridian Strategies. We're building our international division, and I thought there might be collaboration opportunities." The irony was almost too perfect. Richard Blackwell, who had fired me for insubordination, was now essentially asking me for business. "That's an interesting proposal," I said neutrally. "What type of collaboration did you have in mind?" "Your Japanese connections combined with our European network could be complementary. We could discuss a referral arrangement or joint ventures on specific projects." I studied him, searching for signs of the humility this situation should have taught him. I found none, just strategic adaptation to changed circumstances. "I appreciate you thinking of us, Richard. We're quite selective about our partnerships, focusing on organizations with values alignment. I'll review your materials and be in touch if I see a fit." He recognized the diplomatic rejection for what it was. "Of course, I understand you're busy with your boutique operation. The offer remains open." After he left, James shook his head. "Unbelievable. Did he really expect you to help him after what he did?" "People like Richard always land on their feet," I observed. "They adapt their approach, but never really change their nature." Later that week, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at an international business conference. The same one where I had first met Mr. Tanaka a year and a half earlier. The topic they wanted me to address: ethical leadership in international business. As I prepared my presentation, reflecting on the journey from corporate employee to business owner, I realized how completely my professional identity had transformed. The company I was building reflected my values in every aspect of its operation: transparent client communication, credit given where due, work-life balance encouraged rather than just talked about. The true vindication came during my quarterly review meeting with Mr. Tanaka. After going through our results, which had exceeded even my careful projections, he offered the highest compliment in his characteristically understated way. "Mitchell-san, when we first discussed working together directly, I saw potential but had natural concerns about capacity. Now, I understand that your approach was never dependent on Westridge's resources, but on your integrity and intelligence. Those qualities, it seems, are much rarer than office space and support staff." What had begun as a professional crisis had become the foundation for something far more valuable than the corporate advancement I had once pursued. I had built something authentic, something that succeeded precisely because it rejected the dysfunctional patterns I had escaped. In the end, Richard's attempt to diminish me had instead set me free. 1 year and 3 months after that fateful meeting with Tanaka Corporation, I stood in the reception area of our new offices, watching my team at work. We had grown to 23 employees, occupying the entire 10th floor of a downtown building with river views. The space was designed to reflect our values: open and collaborative, but with private areas for focused work. Professional but comfortable, with artwork from local artists and plants bringing life to every corner. James had developed into an exceptional director of operations, managing our growing team with the same integrity and attention to detail that had made him a valuable ally at Westridge. Victoria Hayes consulted regularly on our HR policies, helping us build a genuinely supportive culture, rather than just paying lip service to work-life balance. Most significantly, we had hired 6 talented professionals from diverse backgrounds who had been overlooked or undervalued at larger firms, people with unconventional career paths, gaps in their resumes due to family responsibilities or educational backgrounds from institutions outside the elite circle. Their perspectives had enriched our work immeasurably. Our client roster had expanded beyond Japanese companies to include businesses from Korea, Germany, and Canada seeking to navigate American markets. We had become known for thorough cultural understanding combined with absolute honesty about timelines and deliverables, a reputation that generated steady referrals. "The new associates are settling in well," James commented, joining me at the window. "Emily's already impressing the Schmidt team with her research." Emily had been a particularly satisfying hire, a brilliant analyst who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion at her previous firm because she was quieter than her male colleagues. Under our mentorship, she was blossoming into a confident consultant while maintaining her thoughtful approach. "I'm not surprised. She sees connections others miss," I replied. "How are the expansion plans coming along?" "We were considering opening a small office in Chicago to better serve our Midwestern clients, our first geographic expansion. The numbers look solid. If the brewer contract comes through next month, we'll have the financial cushion to move forward." As we discussed details, my assistant approached. "Sam, sorry to interrupt. There's a call you might want to take." Elizabeth Chan from Westridge. Elizabeth had transformed Westridge's client services division after the merger, implementing many of the ethical practices I had advocated for unsuccessfully during my time there. We had maintained a cordial professional relationship, occasionally referring clients that were better suited to each other's specialties. "Elizabeth, good to hear from you. What can I do for you today?" "Sam, I'll get straight to the point. Westridge is hosting a leadership panel on building ethical consulting practices at next month's industry summit. Given your success and unique perspective on our organization's journey, we'd like to invite you to participate." The invitation was significant, a public acknowledgement of both my success and Westridge's past failures. The Sam of 2 years ago would have seen this as vindication, perhaps even a triumph. The Sam of today recognized it simply as an opportunity to influence positive change in an industry that needed it. "I'd be happy to participate, Elizabeth. Send me the details and we'll make it work." After hanging up, I walked through our office, checking in briefly with team members, noting the focused energy and occasional laughter that characterized our workplace culture. In the small kitchen area, I found a group of associates engaged in an animated discussion about a challenging client situation, collaboratively brainstorming approaches without concern for who would get credit. Later that afternoon, I had my monthly call with Mr. Tanaka, who had become something of a mentor as our professional relationship evolved. "Mitchell-san, I was pleased to hear about your new client in Osaka. Matsumoto-san speaks highly of your team's initial analysis." "Thank you. We're excited about the opportunity. Though I should note that there are regulatory complexities we're still researching. We may need an additional 2 weeks before presenting final recommendations." "Your honesty remains refreshing even after all this time," Mr. Tanaka commented. "Most consultants would promise the original timeline and deliver excuses later. This was the approach I had insisted on from the beginning: absolute transparency. Even when it meant delivering news a client might not want to hear, it had occasionally cost us potential business from clients seeking quick fixes or magical results. But it had built unshakable trust with clients who valued substance over flash." As I wrapped up my day, a calendar notification reminded me of something I had scheduled months earlier, a personal check-in on my professional journey. Every quarter, I blocked an hour to reflect on where I was versus where I wanted to be. A practice I had started during the turbulent early days of independence. I opened the document where I tracked these reflections and began writing. The company continues to grow organically, with client satisfaction driving referrals. Our retention rate remains at 94%, well above the industry average. The team is cohesive and aligned with our values, with turnover below 10% annually despite recruitment attempts from larger firms. Personally, I've found a sustainable rhythm between leadership responsibilities and hands-on client work. The mentorship program is beginning to show results, with junior consultants taking increasingly significant roles in client presentations. The financial security I once sought through corporate advancement has been achieved independently. But more importantly, I've built something that reflects my values rather than forcing me to compromise them. The crisis that seemed catastrophic in the moment being fired in front of our biggest potential client ultimately freed me from a system that was never aligned with who I am. As I finished my reflection, my phone buzzed with a text from James. Saw Richard today at Barton conference.
He's looking for work again. Meridian let him go last month. I wasn't surprised.
Richard's approach taking credit, overpromising, undermining colleagues, might create short-term impressions of success, but it wasn't sustainable. Eventually, results mattered more than self-promotion. The following week brought an unexpected encounter. I was having lunch with a client at L'Amour, an upscale restaurant downtown, when I spotted a familiar figure at the bar, Richard dining alone, scrolling through his phone between bites. Our eyes met briefly. For a moment, I saw a flash of the old arrogance, quickly replaced by something more complex: recognition, perhaps even regret. I nodded politely and returned to my conversation. As we were leaving, Richard approached our table. Samantha, congratulations on your firm's growth. I see your name mentioned frequently in industry publications these days. Thank you, Richard. How have you been? Transitioning, exploring opportunities, the euphemisms of unemployment. Your trajectory has been impressive. I underestimated you, clearly. There was no satisfaction in seeing him humbled. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of gratitude for the catalyst he had unintentionally provided. Sometimes the worst professional moments lead to the best outcomes, I offered. I wish you luck with your next chapter. Back at the office, I found Mr. Tanaka had sent an unexpected message. Mitchell-san, our board has approved the expansion budget we discussed. We would like your firm to handle the complete implementation rather than dividing responsibilities with larger consultancies as originally planned. Your team has earned our full confidence. It was our largest single contract to date, one that would require hiring additional specialists and possibly accelerating our Chicago office plans. The trust reflected in this decision, choosing our boutique firm over global consulting giants, validated everything we had built. That evening, I gathered our team to share the news and acknowledge their contributions. Looking at their faces, engaged, proud, collaborative rather than competitive, I realized the true measure of success wasn't the revenue growth or prestigious client roster, but the culture we had created together. This opportunity comes because of how each of you approaches your work, I told them. Your thoroughness, your honesty with clients, even when it's difficult, your willingness to collaborate rather than compete. These qualities have built our reputation. Later, alone in my office, as evening settled over the city, I reflected on the journey. The humiliation of being fired in front of clients had been transformed into the foundation of something authentic and sustainable. The freedom to build according to my values had yielded not just financial success, but profound professional satisfaction. The lessons were clear. Preparation and specialized knowledge create irreplaceable value. Being underestimated can become a powerful advantage if you stay focused on substance rather than appearances. Maintaining dignity and professionalism, even when others abandon theirs, ultimately serves you better than emotional reactions. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the path forward requires leaving behind not just a specific job, but an entire approach to professional advancement. Building something aligned with your values is ultimately more satisfying than climbing a ladder someone else designed. What has your professional journey taught you? Have you ever had a seeming disaster turn into an unexpected opportunity? Share your story in the comments below. And if you found value in this experience, please like and subscribe for more insights on building authentic success. Remember, sometimes the moments that feel like our biggest professional failures are actually doorways to something far better than what we're leaving behind. Thank you for being part of this community, and I wish you the courage to follow your own path wherever it may lead.